Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 6 of Red Brick Recap. My name is Jack Miller, back again, joined again by my co-host, Ted. Ted, how are we doing on this lovely Thursday afternoon?
We're doing all right. Can't complain.
I know it's been cold recently, but weather's starting to get warmer now for the weekend, so welcome sight here. I know it's been a tricky couple weeks school-wise. Grad school, once again, is kicking our butts, for lack of a better term, but we're going to get through, and we're back here to talk about Miami sports for another hour on another Thursday. So, Ted, anything to say before we dive in?
No, I'm just hoping the warm weather encourages people to come out for OU Hate Week.
OU Hate Week. I was debating titling this episode OU Hate Week, but I'm not really sure what our compliance would say on that. So we'll have to double check before we start naming stuff like that. But anyway, yeah. So we jumped off last week's episode by doing a sport rundown about all the other fall sports taking place here in Miami. I thought it'd be kind of nice to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Maybe this was a weekly thing, maybe not. But before we jump into, I know we've talked primarily football the last couple of weeks, but I want to make sure we give ample time to talk about the other sports going on here at Miami as well. First off, hockey. I mean, where to even start with them? That was a dominant 2-game display. They looked like a really, really good team. Beat Anchorage twice in 2 days. I think the combined score was 7-3 over the 2 games. Set off by a 4-1 win on Saturday. Really impressive for Noreen's first home games. I was impressed. A lot of obviously still room for improvement in Alaska Anchorage. Might not be the strongest opponent we'll play this season, but there's stuff to build off here, and it was encouraging to see for a team that's played together only 4 times now.
Yeah, that's what out-of-conference games are for. You're not necessarily going to schedule the toughest of opponents, especially if you are a newer coach to a new program. And that's no shot at Alaska Anchorage. They are a very, very competitive team. They play some of the toughest teams in all of conference hockey. So that's no shot at them. But Miami just looked like the better team, and they looked like they had been playing together for more than 4 games, for lack of better terms. But yeah, like you mentioned, they looked pretty strong. 14 goals in 4 games. They moved to 2-0-2, so not the 0-0-4 we were kind of joking around about last week. But hey, 2-0 or 2-0-2 is where we want to be realistically. But yeah, they looked good. It's a much more fast-paced, high-flying style of hockey. They're getting pucks on net. They're getting shots up, which is exactly what you want to see from this team. They're not a team that's going to be more defensively minded, and they're not going to dump and chase like Joe mentioned a couple weeks ago on the pod. So they're doing exactly what they've been brought in to do. Again, I can't overstate how much 14 goals in 4 games means for this team. It was probably about 14 goals in, call it 8, 9, 10 games last year. They were not scoring the puck at a high rate. So this is big for momentum. It's big for the chemistry of the team. And once you get that first win under your belt, it's kind of like what we were talking about in football last couple of weeks. Like once you get that first win under your belt, you feel so much better. A weight is lifted off your shoulders. You just feel so much better as a program moving forward. And yeah, speaking of moving forward, today they got a game at Goggins, 7:05 p.m. I want to say, but against RMU, Robert Morris University, and they have a little home and home, which you don't really see a whole lot in college hockey, especially out of conference. But they'll play here tonight, and then they will move to Pennsylvania and play at Robert Morris on Saturday.
We mentioned this. I saw it on Twitter, and we talked about it a little bit before coming on the air. Big Ben Roethlisberger is doing the puck drop on Friday night. He's not coming back to Oxford. He's doing the puck drop at Robert Morris, which I don't know about you. I thought that was a little strange to not come back to your alma mater to do the puck drop at your home arena. Maybe it was a matter of convenience. We'll never know. We're not super tight with Big Ben here. We'll never have the full picture, but that did seem a little strange to me.
Yeah, it feels weird because of everything that kind of revolves around Big Ben. He's got his number retired. The practice field, not the building, but the practice field for Miami University football is Ben Roethlisberger Field, and he's just got that kind of, oh, this is going to sound so Gen Z, but he's got that aura around him on campus. I cringe saying that, but he's got kind of that vibe around him on campus where it's like, okay, the only thing people know about Miami football most times is Ben Roethlisberger. So you
Right.
may be right. It may be a convenience thing because look, he's already in Pennsylvania, Western Pennsylvania. So it would make sense for him to just kind of say, you know what, my team is coming, or my alma mater is coming to a place that's close to me, and I might as well say hello to the alma mater, go support the alma mater. Because look, at the end of the day, Pittsburgh to Oxford is not a short drive, and
Right.
realistically, it's probably a lot of work to try to get a plane ride to from Pittsburgh to Oxford or Cincinnati or wherever he wants to fly into. So you're right; it's probably a matter of convenience, but it does feel like kind of a slight jab that Miami like can't figure out a way to get him on campus and like bring him back. Because, like you said, we were talking about it before. When was the last time Ben Roethlisberger was on Miami's campus?
I can't think of the time, at least since I've been here, and I've been here now 5 years. I can't remember a single time where it's even been rumored that he was coming back.
Yeah, I mean, we've had the most recent memory that I have of anybody who has big, Miami or big significance outside of Miami was Sean McVay when he came back for his retirement, or not his retirement. Oh my gosh, his statue in the Cradle of Coaches. He came and he was at Brick Street. He was signing autographs. He was taking pictures with people, and that's really the last of anybody kind of, for lack of better terms, famous that I remember coming to campus in the sports world because you don't see a lot of the hockey players come back. You don't see a lot of the basketball players come back. Like we were talking about Wally Zerbiak. He's got a daughter, a freshman here at Miami or sophomore, I can't remember. But he showed up to the basketball offices, said hi to the coaching staff, and I think said hi to whoever was there. But it's not like he was leading practice or talking
Right.
to the guys. It's early in the season, so they don't even have practice. But you don't see a lot of Miami alum come back from some of these major sports, and I emphasize major in terms of like the ticketed events. Now there
Right.
are a ton of Miami alumni who come back to the other sports that we'll dive into a little bit, especially like softball. Carly Spade came back for her jersey retirement, and that was in the middle of the football season. She'll come back, I bet, again at some point. So I wonder what is the holdup or like what is the stopping point.
Yeah. I mean, we can sit here and theorize all we want, but I mean, we're not we don't know for certain what's going on, and again, it might just be a matter of convenience.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
looking ahead to tonight, I guess tonight's game at home against RMU. I mean, there's a couple players that I'm really looking forward to watching. I mean, Matt Chapani has been on fire this so far to start the season. I think he's got what 3 goals so far already. Pulling it up
Let
now.
me check
Matt
the
Chapani,
stats.
he's got 5 points, 2 goals. I think he had two on Saturday against Anchorage. I mean, he started the year on fire. Colby Ambrosio started the year on fire. Those two guys have just completely changed that offensive look here. And then Bruno Berveras in goal continues to just be lights out. 1.5 or 1.9 goals against, 93% save percentage, and 2 wins already under his belt. That's a really good line to build off of. Obviously, once we get into NCHC play, these numbers might not look as good, but that's a really good jumping off point for a team that desperately needs one.
Yeah, those are two guys that have been, I mean, or two, three guys that have a lot of talent. They have a lot of experience, especially Colby Ambrosio. So, and Ambrosio, like we've mentioned, is a transfer talent. So he's been brought in to come in, score goals, put up points. That's exactly what he's doing. 7 points, 5 assists, 2 goals. He's contributed to half of the Miami goals. Just think about that for a second. A player who doesn't have any Miami blood in him until he came here is leading the team in points, and he's contributed to half of the Miami goals. That is just a heater of a start.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, for Robert Morris, they were a team that went 11-25-3 last year. This is actually their first official game this season. They've had three exhibition games, back to back to back. Actually, they played at Bowling Green. They played versus Simon Fraser, which I have no idea what that is. I want to say it's a Canadian school. Looking at the logo here, and
Can-
then the U.S. national U18 hockey team. So this is their it'll be their home opener on Saturday, and it's also their alumni weekend. So big games coming up for Miami here.
Yeah. Well, let's hope for another at least one win. I'd be happy with an undefeated weekend with one win with a tie.
Yeah.
Even a split wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but I mean, obviously the dream is 2 wins.
Yeah.
But before we jump back into football, let's run down the other Miami sports that have went on in the past week. We have women's soccer continued their home unbeaten streak, two wins, 4 ties, no losses. They tied at home to Akron. However, they did come back and lose 2-0 on the road in Toledo. They're still unbeaten at home, but they still need to win a little bit more and probably win out to have a shot at the playoffs.
Yeah. I don't know what the percentage of making the playoffs is for them, but it is pretty low. So they definitely do have to just keep winning out, which has proven to be a little tough for the team. But maybe there's still some magic. Maybe they just keep having to play. Maybe they try to make sure that all their games are at home, and
That's why you play the games, right?
Exactly.
Come moving on to field hockey. We talked about it last week. That's one of the best teams Miami has here on campus, and they looked the part on Friday, beating App State 1-0 at home. You said it last week. App State's one of the best teams in that conference, and now they're level with us at 4-1 in that conference. I know that's one of Miami's best sports. It's a huge win, and I know that's one of Miami's best sports, and we've been pretty good about coming home with conference titles. It seemed like on paper when I was looking at it that it's a much more balanced conference this year. Like the standings are a lot closer together than I remember them being in the past. But I mean, it's still I still back Miami to bring home another conference title.
Yeah, Miami. They needed this win against App State. They still, I think, are still sitting at 3 in the conference, even though they have the same record as App State overall and in conference, and they have the tiebreaker over App State. So I think come seeding time, they may switch it up, but it may just be home and away records. Who knows? But yeah, absolutely, that was a big win for the RedHawks. Any ground they can make up on James Madison is huge because James Madison is still sitting at a perfect 4-0 in the conference. So yeah, I mean, Miami's always just really, really good. And James Madison, they have, let's see, they have 1, 2, 3 more. They have 3 more conference games before the playoffs, and the last one is against App State. So maybe App State can take a game off of JMU while Miami keeps winning, but who knows?
Yep, agreed. Moving on, we got men's golf. They were at a tournament in the Red Hawk Invitational in Pittsburgh this week. I think that tournament just wrapped up today, or maybe it was yesterday. But they finished 4th in Pittsburgh, 4th as a team. Shout out Cameron Pirro, who shot a 5 under or 5 below par with a score of 208. I mean, I wish I had that kind of golf ability. I would be out there every single day if I could shoot 5 under. But I mean, we'll take 4th place isn't the worst thing in the world. We'll take that. We had Matthew Mattioli, I think I said that right, finished 13th. We got plenty of guys shoot under par, played pretty well. And they go on to move on to the Flyer Invitational in Kettering next weekend.
Shout out golf.
Yeah, that's a sport we haven't talked about a ton. I mean, that's a sport I definitely enjoy off camera. Nowhere close enough to playing it collegiately or professionally, but still something I like to keep an eye on from time to time.
They have these like the sick Swoop logo. It's Swoop swinging a golf club, and they had like a pre-order for it, I think last spring semester, and I just learned about it the other day. I want to get my hands on either a hat of that or a polo of that because it's embroidered too. It looks so cool. I just have to shout that out because it looks so cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if they come available, I might find myself buying one too. Who knows? And then we'll close it out here with volleyball. It's been a tough season for them in the MAC. Lost to Buffalo and Akron, both at home. 0-7 in the conference. They've gone now nearly a month without a win. It's Dan Gwitt's first season, so not a whole lot to go off here. But I mean, 0-7 in the conference is just never what you want to see.
Yeah, it's just a building season. That's kind of how we have to put it. Because you're right. It's been a really tough season, but there's still a lot of things to build on. The team is still really, really young, so there is a lot of hope for the future. You just kind of got to feel bad for some of the seniors who are still searching for that MAC win. They, like you said, their last win was a month ago. They haven't won in conference, but some of those seniors who have been here for 4 years, specifically, I'm thinking of the libero, Margot Lawson. She's been an absolute stud for the team for 4 years, and last couple of years have been a little rough for the RedHawks. So you feel for some of these seniors who are just trying to figure it out. But yeah, I mean, it's been a tough season, but there's hope for the future.
Well, speaking of hope for the future, we are making history this week on Red Brick Recap. This is the first time on the podcast we can talk about a comfortable win.
Woo!
Comfortable 20-plus point win on the road where Miami looked. I mean, I talked about it last week. I've talked about it the last 2 weeks where Miami had to start controlling games. They had to start controlling drives and looking like they were the aggressor, not reacting to what the other team was doing. This was the game that I wanted to see. This is exactly what I wanted to see out of Miami. I wanted to see them control the football. I wanted to see them take deep shots. I wanted to see them put their opponent under pressure, and they did all three of those things. So shout out Miami football, 38-14 win on the road against Eastern Michigan, who was 4-1 coming into the game. That's just a massive win. That is just something that gets your season right back on track.
Yeah, I have it in the notes, but this is Ted Knows Ball Part 2. I called it with Buffalo and Northern Illinois, their game, but this was a trap game for the Eagles. This was a game coming in where they felt like they were riding high. They were 4-1. They're playing a team that looked a little defeated. I mean, we basically have been having a funeral for Miami football the last couple of weeks. It's been rough sailing for the RedHawks, and Miami comes in and just stomps all over Max Crosby Field on that gray field. They just stomped right on them, and like I said, it was a trap game.
Yeah, and before we go any further and start talking about this game a little bit, I mean, we would be remiss without mentioning probably the person we've talked about most on this podcast over the last 5 weeks. Brett Gabbert has heard all of the talk we've said around him and completely shut us up this week. Completely dominant performance. I mean, you cannot start a game better than throwing for a 75-yard touchdown on your first play from scrimmage. I was watching and I was blown away. Like, he looked like a completely different player. It looked like the Brett Gabbert we've seen so many times over the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I think Brett has finally knocked the rust off for, we've been saying it a lot. We just keep hoping that the rust finally shakes off. And I think this was Brett's first game without an interception this season.
Yeah.
Which sounds tough to hear, but hey, he broke the streak. He didn't have an interception last game, which is positive momentum, positive strides, and he looked really, really good, and his decision-making looked really keen. He was really smart with the ball. The football team posted a graphic the other day, and it was called Big Play Brett. Gabbert on pass plays of 10-plus yards versus Eastern Michigan was 7 of 7 for 206 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Oof.
That is the Brett Gabbert we have come to know and love. And I think this is a huge confidence booster for him. This is a huge confidence booster for the team, because we've been saying if they can put it all together, right, especially the offense, just focusing on the offense, we said last week, if they can get a 100-yard passer, a 100-yard receiver, and a 100-yard rusher, they're going to win games. And guess what happened? They had a 100-yard passer, a 100-yard wide receiver, and a 100-yard rusher, and they destroyed Eastern Michigan. So I think this is a huge, huge momentum builder for the RedHawks, and the hope is that they can continue it this week against OU.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you gave me probably 50 attempts on College Football 25, I don't think I could go for 7 for 7 for 206 and 3 tutters. That's just insane numbers. And I mean, he earned his spot on the Davey O'Brien grade 8 list, which is the top 8 quarterbacks per week. I mean, that's just, I think in recent memory, that's the best performance I've seen him put together. Probably at least in the last 2 years. So I'm just shout out Brett Gabbert. Let's hope he builds on it this week in a rivalry game at home in front of the home crowd. But yeah, I mean, this is the best offensive showing Miami's shown this year. This is the most points they've scored in the game since September of 2023, which I'm not really sure you can even count because we're playing Delaware State and we put up 62 on them in a week 2 game at home. And it's our first 30-plus point game since last year against OU. Hopefully that's a little bit of foreshadowing. Hopefully that's a little bit of sign of things to come. But it's really nice to see this offense rolling and performing in the way we've been speaking about them and speaking about what they could do over the last 5 or 6 weeks.
Yeah. I put it in the notes. Miami, the last 2 times they've beaten OU, they've won the MAC championship. OU is one of the 3 remaining teams in the conference that is 2-0. If we can put a little 1 next to their name, their tiebreaker goes our way, or goes Miami's way, I should say, and they move up in the conference. And all of a sudden, we're talking about a season that we were like, oh, maybe it's a lost season. Miami moves to 3-4. They become 2-1 in the conference. We're now talking about a possible resurgence back to Detroit. Again, we're probably getting a little too far ahead of ourselves. We got to focus on what's in front of us, which is OU. But it's not going to be easy by any means.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, you said it best, like the 100-yard rusher, the 100-yard receiver. We got both of those this week, and I think that that week has really cemented them into these kind of roles where they've been playing somewhat well for parts and bits and pieces of the season. But if they can start building on what they did on Saturday and bring it into the next couple of weeks, I think they've really locked down their spots. And that's Reggie Virgil at wide receiver. I talked about him the first 3 weeks as like the guy who's going to be the vertical threat, the guy who's going to get open down the field alongside Javon Tracy. And he did exactly that, though. I mean, the first play from scrimmage goes for a touchdown for 75 yards. Like that's the kind of threat you need to have behind the secondary. And then under center, Keon Mosey. We said it in the last couple of weeks. We need a running back to step up and take that workhorse slot, that workhorse role in this backfield. And Keon Mosey's done that. I think this is back-to-back games now where he's rushed for over 100 yards. So I don't think he did against Toledo, but I know he has before this season.
He didn't do it against Toledo. He did it against UMass. He had, I think it was like 100. It was like barely over the line. I think it was like 102, 105 yards and a touchdown against UMass.
Well, I mean, still, I'll take it. Like,
yeah,
like this is the running game that Miami needs. They need to have a 100-yard back in the backfield. And also, Jordan Brunson, if I remember correctly, also had a really solid game. I think it was like 65 yards.
Yeah, the last score he had, he broke off and ran for a touchdown.
Yeah, like we'll take these individual performance. Yeah, for Jordan Brunson, he has six rushes, 65 yards. The long was 44, so maybe that inflated it a little bit, but
that was that last touchdown, that 44-yard run. And I mean, he was untouched. He was untouched. He broke through the line, and EMU had run commit, and he just saw broad daylight in front of him.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of what we talked about that Miami needed. It was that tandem in the backfield. Like last year was Amos, and then a little bit of Kenny Tracy, if I remember correctly. Like Kevin Davis kind of jumping in for a couple plays. Now we kind of have that again in Keon Mosey and Jordan Brunson, where you got the big guy, little guy thing going, where you have Brunson, you can kind of gash for 1 and 2 yards, and then Keon Mosey, you can open up the running lanes a little bit. So I'd like to see them build on what they did on Saturday and take it into the home game, but it's, as we keep saying, it's momentum. It's all about momentum, and Miami's built some.
Yeah, you mentioned your MVP was the offensive line. I think this was the first game where Brett Gabbert had a net positive amount of rushing yards. He finished with 29 rushing yards, which, for Brett Gabbert is pretty good after all of his injuries. He used to be a little more mobile, but of course he's had a couple of injuries that have set him back. But my MVP, we've talked about him. It's Brett Gabbert for me. I don't know what more we can say that we already haven't said about him. He completely shut us up this weekend. He finally looked like the Brett Gabbert that we know, which is huge. And he finally got his confidence back. And hopefully this is his best game thus far. Hopefully he continues to build. Maybe we see a 255 touchdown game for him. Who knows? But I think now that Gabbert knows, I think the big thing is that he knows he can compete again.
Right.
And mentally he knows he can play against the high level talent again. Because look, we talked about him as if he was playing against scrubs and he wasn't playing well. He had to play 3 Power 5 or Power 4 teams, and one of them being Notre Dame. Look, I don't like Notre Dame as much as the next guy. Sorry, Tim. but it's still Notre Dame. They were still ranked, and they were coming off of a MAC loss, so they're playing with an extra vengeance. And so while we have kind of talked negatively about Gabbert, he's finally finding that rhythm that we know he can get into. And hopefully this is a taste of what's to come.
Yeah, I mean, no one knows the MAC better than Brett Gabbert. So, I mean, there's very few quarterbacks who get as many go-arounds on the MAC trail as he does. So, hopefully, he sees some familiar opponents and knows how to deal with them. But yeah, I want to bring it back to the offensive line. Last week, it was kind of a iffy point. They were allowing a lot of hits. I mean, I can remember off the top of my head watching Brett get mauled in that Notre Dame game you mentioned. Like, he was getting hit on almost every play. So to see the O-line only allow, I mean, still I say only, but only allow 3 sacks, which is better than it has been in recent weeks. There's still a lot of room for improvement there, and you still have to limit the hits that Brett's taking, but it's an improvement. And like 5 QB hits is a lot less than he'd been taking in previous weeks. And also on the run game side of it too. In the first MAC game, we only put up, I think it was 65 rushing yards against Toledo. We get over 100 with almost, I think it was close to 200 rushing yards. That's a drastic difference. That completely changes your offense. So if the offensive line can keep living up to this potential and keep playing to the level that they're playing at, that completely changes your offense. It completely changes what you're trying to do on the offensive side of the ball and allows you to really give defenses different looks instead of trying to play reactionary depending on what your O-line does.
Absolutely. You took the words right out of my mouth. Being able to run the ball effectively is Miami's bread and butter. Chuck Martin, we've talked about it, and I just want to give a big shout out to Chuck Martin. Let's not overlook how he reacted this week or how he bounced back, because he easily could have said, you know what, like, we lost, we're 1-4, maybe we take it easy. But no, he put the pressure on his guys. He made sure that they were going to come out and ready to play this game. And I mean, he keeps creeping up that all-time winning as head coach at Miami. He's 1 away from Randy Walker. Randy Walker's got 59. Martin's got 58. How sweet would it be for Martin to tie the all-time leader in wins at home against the rival for the Battle of the Bricks? Like how sweet would that be for him? And I want to say that the players know that that's what they're going to play for this week, not just to beat OU, right? Because it's always beat OU.
It's always beat OU.
But there's now that added element of like, okay, we could get this guy to the top of the charts at the very least.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this season especially, I think it's been really tough for Martin. I mean, coming off the expectations that the team had, we've talked about it tenfold. If we've talked about it once, we've talked about it 10,000 times, where this team was expected to maybe reach the 10-win mark, push for being like that group of 5 team in the playoffs. And that just hasn't happened this year for one reason or another. And it'd be really easy for a lot of coaches to just kind of shrink from that and hide from that. But credit to Chuck Martin. He has owned it. He has answered it in every single press availability, in every single press conference. He has said, we know that this is not the team that we are. We are going to get better. And he's been candid at times. Like, I remember watching the Toledo interview, and he straight up said, like, yeah, they beat us in all 3 phases of the game. We did not win a single aspect of the ball. This week, I don't think there was a single aspect of the ball that we lost. So I think that kind of candidness and that kind of, hey, this is what we are, this is what we need to be, okay, go do that, is kind of working for this team. And I think it's a sense of realism that this team kind of needed after some really high expectations coming into the year.
Yeah, Coach Martin has never been one to mince his words, be polite about his words. I think we saw it this spring this summer when he was talking about Graham Nicholson and saying Alabama stole our kicker. He's not going to mince his words, and I think the team knows that, and I think everybody knows that. And he's going to be blunt with his guys. He's going to be candid with his guys. But I think that's what works for him. That's what made him such an effective coordinator at Notre Dame. That's why people want to go to war for this guy, because he's not going to lay it on him sweet. He's going to call it how he sees it. And again, it's a testament to Coach Martin and his game planning. We could say, oh, maybe he can change up the game plan, but no, he stuck with his game plan. He said, I want to run the ball, and that's what they did against Eastern Michigan, and hopefully that's what they could do against OU. And Martin was a guy that was linked to a couple Power 5 openings, and he's always been linked to a couple Power 5 openings, and yet he keeps coming back. He keeps coming back to Miami, whether it's because he doesn't want to go to another job, or he wants to start what he finished here, or finish what he started here.
Yep.
But this is a guy that people coming into the season, I had seen linked to some of these lower Power 5 jobs that could be opening up at the end of the season and in the middle of the season. And it's like, okay, when is Martin going to make that leap back to the big dogs of football? And who knows? Maybe he does it this year, but maybe all of a sudden, if they can make it to the MAC championship after a, for lack of better terms, brutal start to the season, maybe he stays. But it's one of those things where Martin he's really talented at his job. He can rub people the wrong way, but guys want to go to war for him and they want to play for him. And you've seen it at every level with him.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think especially like the wanting to go to war for him has been really crucial, especially in the early weeks where some really tough losses could have really shaken this team's confidence, really shaken the morale of that room. And I think that his ability to just say it how it is has really kind of kept that team together and kind of let them look at it from a realistic lens. But I also think that with him, like I couldn't see him going anywhere else. Like maybe that's just me. And I don't want to I don't want to pretend like I know what's going on. I just like ever since I've been here, it's been Coach Martin's team. And I think that like he's got an identity here, like with the vest and the headset. Like you see him walk into basketball games, you know who he is because of what he's wearing. He wears the red vest with the undershirt. So I think he's built an identity here, and he's built this culture of a program that you said, like he said it against UC when they struggled to run the football. Like this is who we are. This is the team that we are, and we're not going to shy away from that. And I'll hold my hands up. I was very critical of Coach Martin earlier in the season in some of his play calling. I'll hold my hands up. He proved me wrong on Saturday, and he made all the right calls and got his team over the finish line. So I'm with you. I really hope he gets the chance to get to that record on Saturday, and I really hope that his team fights for him to do that. But, I mean, there's no one more deserving to take that most Miami wins in school history than Chuck Martin.
Yeah, this was a guy who got criticized when he took this job. They were like, what are you doing? You're leaving Notre Dame after making it to the national championship game? Like, what are you doing? You could stay at Notre Dame and wait a couple years and get a Group of 5 job or a Power 5 job. Why are you leaving? And who knows what would have happened if he stayed, right? Because who was the coach at that time? Brian Kelly, right? He left, and then it became Marcus Freeman.
Yeah.
I may be mixing timelines again. I don't know Notre Dame football like Tim Daniel does, and I kind of wish we had him right now to fact check. But who knows what would happen if he stayed? Maybe he would have been the head coach of Notre Dame football. Who the heck knows? But Martin came down to Oxford, Ohio from South Bend, and with all the critics that were bashing him for taking this job, I think he shut every single one of them up. He's about to become the all-time winningest coach in Miami's history, whether it's this year or whether it's next year. Hopefully it's this year. Really do not want to jinx it, but hopefully it'll be this year. It's just a testament to his character. Block out the haters and just keep pushing. And I think that's kind of been the mantra for this season. Block out the haters and keep doing what you're doing. Keep on keeping on. Right? We've been super critical of him and the team so far, but they've blocked us out and they've kept on keeping on, and they go to work every day. They put the hard hat on, and they've done what they want to do. They're not going to change because two college kids in their houses and apartments are telling them, "Hey, you need to get better. You need to change the offense. You need to change defense." Da 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 da. Like,
Right.
they just keep on keeping on, and it's just a testament to his character, to the team's character. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what a story this season has already been. It's been a roller coaster already, but we've talked about the coach, we've talked about the offense. There's one side of the ball we haven't talked about yet, and that's the defense. Ted, do you want to start with your MVP from Saturday's game?
Front seven. The front seven is my MVP. We've talked about every single one of them almost every week in some capacity, but the guys I want to highlight are, of course, Matt Solopek, 6 solo tackles, interception. That was huge for momentum. That was EMU's first interception all year, first off, or at least from that quarterback. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's from that quarterback.
Yeah, at least from him. So it was his first interception of the year. And then Brian Ugu, we have said his name so many times, and I can't believe I just messed it up, but we've said his name so many times. 1.5 sacks, 4 solo tackles. Corbin Hondru, we haven't talked about him a whole lot, although I believe you mentioned him last week. You said he was going to be an impact player. 5 solo tackles, 11 assisted tackles. Huge. And then Ty Wise, he had 2 assisted tackles, 1.5 sacks. But these guys just are finally getting the pressure that we know they can get on the quarterback. And I think this week that's going to be huge, is getting pressure on the quarterback and keeping him somewhat contained. And that's what someone like Oscar McWood is for. He had 2 TFLs. He's one of those linebackers who keeps getting pressure. But as we're going to preview here in a second, Parker Navarro, he's a dual threat quarterback that Miami loves to struggle against.
Yep. Yeah, well, I think you're absolutely right. That front seven played a huge factor. And you're right. Corbin Hondru is a guy that I really thought was going to have an impact this week, and I'm glad to see that I was right. Maybe Jack knows ball too. But yeah, Corbin Hondru, I mean, what can you say about? He had 16 totals this week in a TFL, had 2 interceptions last week. So, I mean, he's on a roll. It's good to see him step up in the passing game as well. We know what kind of impact he can have in the run game. But my answer for this week for MVP on defense was Eli Blakey. He was injured, I think. Was it the UMass game he might have missed? I think he missed an early season game, but he's come back, and he's come back with a vengeance. 18 tackles on Saturday. He is just a huge part of that pass defense that at times has looked pretty shaky. It's been hit or miss, but this week it looked really, really good. Did its job, and a big part of that was up to Eli Blakey being a shutdown. So huge shout out to him. Would love to see this defense continue to build up momentum this week. And OU's a tough team to do it against. By no means is this going to be an easy matchup. And by no means is this going to be a blowout one way or the other. Like, these two teams match up with each other very well.
Yeah, as you said, Eli Blakey, I just want to give him another shout out. He's been so good, especially filling in for Michael Dowell, the loss of Michael Dowell from last season. He was such a leader on the defensive side of the ball, and now you got to plug him in with Eli Blakey, and Blakey has not missed a step, it looks like, for the most part. But yeah, Ohio is not going to be an easy matchup by any means. They're always fun games to watch too, and I'm very excited that I'll be live in attendance this Saturday, which will be nice. So we mentioned it before. They're one of the 3 unbeaten teams in conference play. Last week, they matched up against Akron, and it's Akron. So Ohio blew them out 30-10. Akron's 1-6. They lost 4 in a row. They're not a great team, but it's MAC play nonetheless. So a win is a win. And yeah, they won a close game against Central Michigan, which there goes my Central Michigan for MAC championship pick, but who knows? But yeah, I mean, in that game, they had 24-0 lead, and then they barely won 27-25. But like I mentioned earlier, Parker Navarro is not a quarterback I want the defense facing, and it's no shade against the defense. It's just Parker Navarro has been that good this season, and I saw this TikTok the other day, and it was like one of those random like Mac slideshow TikToks or whatever, and it said, Parker Navarro is not a quarterback I want to face right now.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, you know what? I feel that. And swiped a couple more photos, and it was a picture of Brett, and it said, Brett Gabbard's officially back. Let's ride the Brett train. And I was like, he's back. So that is my second TikTok reference of the day, which means I should probably log off with the podcast because that is way too much TikTok today.
You're really showing your age here, Ted.
Oh man, it feels weird because we're both in grad school. I should not be talking about TikTok.
Yeah, well, I mean, you mentioned it. Parker Navarro is not a quarterback that we want to face, but that said, he hasn't been super impressive in MAC play, and he's coming off probably 3 straight games now where he's registered a touchdown on the ground. But I'm looking at this Morgan State game right now, and he threw 3 picks. Granted, I don't have the film in front of me, so I don't know if these were like deflections or tip drills or anything like that. But I mean, on paper, 3 picks against Morgan State isn't going to get the job done.
Yeah.
Granted, I mean, they won that game, so I mean, who am I to talk? But on paper, that doesn't exactly scream, competitiveness. But like what really scares me about him is the legs, and we've talked about it with some other quarterbacks, especially like Riley Leonard, who did end up beating us on the ground. Last week against Central Michigan, he ran 14 times and had 176 yards. That's the most I think I've seen a quarterback rush for this year.
Wow.
That's an eye-opener. And the week before, it was 13 for 113.
Oh, my God.
Both of those were boosted by 50-plus long runs that kind of elevated the stats. But 4 straight games with a touchdown on the ground. He's got 5 touchdowns in the air. Like, this is a guy that can beat us in all levels and both levels of the game. So,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. But you said it. Miami has shown not to be able to contain some of these quarterbacks. We mentioned it with Riley Leonard. He broke off what was it, a 50-yard run for a touchdown. He had another big run that he fumbled away, but they've let a lot of these mobile quarterbacks kind of dice them up. And you have it in the notes. They had 313 rushing yards. 313 rushing yards. That's nuts. And especially for a team like Miami who kind of struggles against the run, and we've talked about a lot of their struggles against the run, that is the worst thing you want to see coming into this game.
Right. Yeah, I will say Miami's rush defense has been better. It's not locked down by any means. It's not the rush defense we saw out of the 2023 team. And even that 2023 team struggled against some big names too. So rush defense has been a problem here. And I mean, 313 yards. Again, it's the second time I've mentioned college football 25. So maybe I got to stop playing the game. But you give me 50 games, I don't think I'm rushing for 313 yards. That's insane to do in one game. And I think it comes back to, like, you have a guy like Parker Navarro. You also have a guy like Anthony Tyus coming out of the backfield who can gash you for big plays too. He had 105 yards on 17 carries. It's almost 6 yards a carry. I mean, the closest, we've seen what Miami's been able to do against some guys or against some units that have had similar dynamics. Like, I'm thinking back to this UC game when Sorsby was able to kind of use his legs a little bit. And if he couldn't, then, oh my God, I'm completely blanking on the running back's name. Who's the running back for Cincinnati? I'm completely blanking on him. Oh, Corey Kiner. Corey Kiner and Evan Pryor picked up the slack. And then you look against Notre Dame. Riley Leonard could use his legs a little bit. If the run game isn't there for him, Jeremiah Love can do it. So I think the key for Miami this week is going to be taking away one of the aspects of a quarterback's game. And in Parker Navarro's case, I'd like to see them try and take away the pass game a little bit more, especially that with his struggles in recent weeks. I mean, we said it. He hasn't thrown a passing touchdown since – no, I'm sorry, that's a mistake. But, I mean, three interceptions against Morgan State and 4 on the season. And not – again, Central Michigan only threw for 150 in the air on 59% completion. That seems like the weak point that Miami has to try and expose is that pass game. If you can take away that aspect of his game and force him to run the ball and then focus in on that with the athletes that we have in the linebacking core and on the front line, that to me is the way to go about it.
Yeah, it's kind of the opposite of what we've been saying with some of these other quarterbacks. Just take away the run, make him beat you with his arm. Now it's take away the pass, and look, if he runs, he runs, and if they run the ball, they run the ball. But at the end of the day, if you can get up early, and this is where I think Miami needs to kind of dial in what they did last week, or dial up what they did last week, is get out to a lead early, play with a lead, because especially if you can make it a 2 possession lead, they're not necessarily going to want to run the ball the whole time because they're down. They're going to need to get kind of these big chunk plays and move the ball up and down the field. So if you can get out ahead early, then it forces them to pass, and that's when you might start to see some mistakes from Parker Navarro, or he's not necessarily hitting some throws that he might hit usually if he's not playing fast. And that's a lot of what Miami's been doing, is playing from behind and having to throw the ball a lot. So the hope is that they can flip the script and put it on OU.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we've talked about it. I talked about it against Notre Dame a lot, is if you force a team behind, that changes their entire game plan. You just said it. Like, you force Parker Navarro to take some shots that he wouldn't necessarily be comfortable taking. Maybe there's a tip drill. Maybe there's a botched play. Maybe there's a broken play somewhere. Maybe there's a miscommunication. You force them into these pressure situations, and mistakes do happen, especially in a conference like the MAC, where like we're not necessarily playing the SEC, and like we're not a well-oiled machine at times. So these mistake plays do happen, and if you force them early in the game and force them to play from behind and play desperate, then that puts you on the front foot from the jump. And I think we saw what happened with Eastern Michigan. We were able to do that early, and we ended up winning by 20 something points. That's a recipe that Miami needs to build on. That's something that we haven't done this season apart from that game. And if we can continue to do that, I think that's a recipe for success.
Yeah, Miami's just got to get out ahead. There's been a number of times this season where the script has been flipped on them. They've had to play out of system, and I think that's been a big part of it. And I think that was a big reason for the win against Eastern Michigan, is that they were up big early, so they could continue to play and run their system. And the whole ball game, as you mentioned, just gets absolutely turned on its head when you're playing out of system. You're playing in something that you're not necessarily practicing. You are practicing, but you're not necessarily wanting to be in that, and you try to spend all game not being in that position. And then when you're in that position, you already have a heightened sense of whether it's anxiety or adrenaline, and you're trying to dig yourself out of a hole. So for Miami, if they can continue to play in system, which I think what we saw last week, where they were able to run the ball, they were able to pass the ball, this game should be a winnable game for Miami if they can play in system. If they're out of system, then we might start to see some of the mistakes that we've seen. And again, no shot at Brett Gabbert, but some of the mistakes have been when he's been out of system.
Absolutely right. I want to bring up OU's O-line a little bit. Looking at their numbers against the Central Michigan game, they allowed a lot of TFLs, like 10 TFLs in one game, 2 sacks, 2 fumbles allowed. That seems like a good recipe for a front seven that's coming off a really strong performance. That seems like an area that this coaching staff's going to be like, okay, this is where we create an advantage. This is where we get an edge. So I think the key here is get pressure early, get pressure often, and get that quarterback nervous. If you can shut down the run game, get the QB hit a couple times, speed them up in the pocket, I think that sets up Miami's defense for a ton of success.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe Ohio's offensive line is pretty new. Again, someone may be fact-checking me out there, and that's completely fine. I'll eat my words. But if I remember correctly, there's been a lot of shuffling with this OU offensive line. And you're right. For a front seven that had a monstrous week against a pretty good EMU offensive line, if they're struggling already against Central Michigan and Akron, Miami front seven should have a field day. They allowed 2 fumbles last week. Miami loves generating fumbles.
Yeah.
We've seen it. They've generated a ton of potential turnovers and fumbles. So I think you're right. Miami could have a very, very good day against this offensive line, and it could be very fun to see if you're a Miami fan. I don't know. I kind of lost my train of thought, but I'm really excited to see what the front seven can do against this offensive line.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like my coordinator brain is. I'm going to put on my coordinator hat here for a second. I'm going to pretend like I have one first. But if I'm Miami and I'm looking at early game possessions against an OU offensive line that has really struggled to protect their quarterback, I'm sending Corbin Hondry and I'm sending Oscar McWood off the edge to kind of be that secondary pressure behind Ugu and behind Corey Suttle and behind that big front line and get those and force that O-line into maybe pushing their quarterback out of the pocket, making Parker Navarro run a little bit, or even better, take him down for a tackle for loss. Just get this quarterback worried about the pressure coming from either side or even up the middle. And that takes away so many things that OU's offense is going to try and do. If you take away that quarterback run game by forcing him into pockets he doesn't want to be in, that completely changes OU's offense because they aren't able to get Parker Navarro out in space and they aren't able to set up the plays that he's been so successful on.
I'm really excited to see how OU's offensive line decides to block the front seven because you're really picking your poison with this one. It's you want to send two at Brian Ugu. Okay, you got Corey Suttle and Ty Wise screaming off the opposite edge. You want to try to throw a running back in the A gap. Okay, you got Corbin Hondry screaming down the C gap to come get you. You want to try to block all the edges. Well, then you're leaving Nasir Washington one-on-one with your center, and that's never a favorable matchup because Nasir Washington, we have not talked about him a whole lot. He doesn't show up in the stat sheet a whole lot with some of his statistics, but he has been much improved this season. He didn't get a lot of burn last year because of Austin Ertl, but Nasir Washington has stepped into this role that Austin Ertl has played, and he has filled it beautifully. Again, he's not a guy that shows up in the stat sheet, but he's a guy that changes where the running back's going to go, right? If he wins his matchup against whoever's blocking him, and you're a running back starting down the barrel of the gun with that Nasir Washington's behind, you're going to try to go to the outside, and then all of a sudden, here comes Solopek flying off the edge, and he's going to get a tackle, or McWood or Hondu or whoever's going to come back, and Nasir Washington has that fear factor almost if he wins that matchup or if he wins that block. And I think that may be key because if Washington gets one-on-one with a center and then all of a sudden he throws the center off of him and Parker Navarro staring down Nasir Washington, he's going to get a little jumpy, a little antsy, try to force some things, try to get out of the pocket, and here comes whoever's coming off the edge.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I also think that with Parker Navarro, he's averaging about 12 yards per completion, which means you're waiting at least 2 or 3 seconds on average to find an open receiver. 2 or 3 seconds is all that front line needs for Miami if they're firing. That is a lot of time for them to get home. So force Parker Navarro into these early maybe check down throws and these little screens. And I mean, we know how mobile our linebacking core is. You let Salopek get in space, he's going to get him down. You let Ty Wise get into open space, he's likely going to make that tackle. So I think if you force him to make these earlier throws, you're going to be a lot more successful than kind of letting him sit in the pocket and picking his shots a little bit more.
This is one of my favorite things about the Miami defense is that they don't run a lot of nickel. They don't run a lot of extra defensive back. They play a true 3-4, 4-3, depending on matchups and who's who, but they don't necessarily switch out a lot of their defensive schemes, and they don't switch out a lot of their big guys. And one of the best things about their big guys is look, if you want Ty Wise to play on the line, he can play on the line. He can come off the line. If you want him to play linebacker, he'll play linebacker. And he's been I would love to see the snap breakdown of where he's played because it hasn't been all at linebacker and it hasn't been all off the edge. So that's what I think is so impactful for this Miami defense this week is that they have a front seven that they can trust to get in and to hit the quarterback. And as you mentioned, it takes 2 to 3 to 4 seconds for Navarro to let the play develop to get those big chunk yards. And that's where it's going to hurt Miami if they're not generating pressure. But if Miami's able to generate that type of pressure, then Navarro is going to have to escape the pocket. He's going to have to make throws on the run. And look, if he's beating you that way, you hate to get beat that way, but you're doing everything you can at that point.
Right. Well, before we get out of here, I know we're getting crunched on time, but I want to talk about a little bit about OU's defense and a little bit of what we can expect from the Miami offense coming forward this weekend. The defense wasn't able to create a ton of pressure on Jefferson for CMU, but I guess they didn't really have to because Jefferson only threw the ball 13 times, and they went to the run game more often than not, and led by Marion Lukes and CMU with 110 yards and 3 touchdowns and 179-yard rushing. That tells me, like, hey, Keon Mosey's coming off a big week. Let's get him rolling early. Let's get him in space early. Let's see what he can do in open space. Let's see if he can break into the secondary and create some big plays. That seems like a point of emphasis for Miami to build on the offensive side.
Yeah, if they can get the running game rolling early, I think we said it last week for the Eastern Michigan game, is get the running game working early to allow Gabbert to have a big day and allow him to find the open seams and toss in a little more play action too. I mean, play action is the easiest way to get Brett moving and to get him in rhythm, is even if he's hitting these little check downs for 2, 3, 4, 5 yards, just to get him in rhythm a little bit and to make the defense have to think, okay, it's going to be run, is it going to be pass? Oh my gosh, it's a play action. Like, that will help, or establishing the running game early will help this Miami team really get off and running.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I would also like to see them trying to get the outside receiver. I know they got involved against EMU, but trying to get the outside receivers involved early. Like, make OU think about the outside shot. Make OU think, okay, we have to worry about Tremont Tracy. Okay, we have to worry about Reggie Virgil. Okay, we haven't talked about it all day. Cade McDonald. Make them worried about Cade McDonald too. Like, get them open down the field, maybe take a couple shots at them, and then that opens up the run game even more if they're having to worry about the top being taken off of them.
Yeah, even if on a first down, whether it's your first play from scrimmage or maybe it's one after something hasn't been going right, maybe it's 3 and out or whatever, run a deep shot. Just throw the deep shot, because all of a sudden it's like not Eastern Michigan. OU's got to be prepared for that. They got to say, okay, wait a second, hold on. They just tried to take a deep shot. Are they going to do it again? Da 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 da. And it just leads to the unraveling of the defensive game plan.
Absolutely. I mean, we saw it last week. Take the deep shot early, and who knows what happens? You go for 75 yards to kick off the game.
Chicks dig the long ball.
Amen to that. Well, last thing we want to talk about before we get out of here, big home game. I mean, I've said it for the last couple of weeks. I went on my little mini rant after the UMass game, but I want to see this home crowd get loud. It's family weekend. There's going to be a bunch of people in town. My parents were trying to come down. They couldn't get a hotel room because of how many people are coming down this weekend. It's going to be a 70-degree sunny day. Get the crowd involved early. Get the crowd hyped up early. Get Yager rocking, and it should be a really, really fun Saturday afternoon out at Yager.
Game's at 3:30, so, to the college students who are listening, go to beat a little bit, have your fun, then, just walk right on down to Yager. Student tickets are free. You should be there.
There's no excuses. Student tickets are literally cheaper than anything else in town. Students should be there. Bring your parents, bring your families. Should be a really fun day. I was trying to think back, outside of the first 5 minutes of each half in the UC game, hasn't been a ton to cheer about at home for Miami. Let's change that this weekend. Let's give the home crowd a show. Let's send the home crowd home happy. I'm going to get there early because I want to see the tailgate lot. I want to see it rocking. I want to see family weekend in full swing. So I'm looking forward to this weekend. I can't wait to see what it brings. Ted, anything you want to say before we get on out of here?
No, I'm excited. I'm excited for what's to come. My girlfriend's family is coming out for family weekend. They're taking me to the game. I was like, oh, I can get a student ticket. And they're like, nope, we got a ticket. So I'll be there. I won't be in the student section, but I'll be in the paid section. But hopefully I see a lot more people than I did for the UMass game. And again, it's going to be sunny. The game is free. At the very least, the stadium atmosphere is always fun. Just show up. Just show up.
What's the worst that could happen, right?
They sell beer at the games now. Come get beer at the games. If that's what you're worried about, just come get it. Like you all
Yeah.
got moolah, you all got declining dollars left. It's probably cheaper. It's probably cheaper there. I mean, I know it's beat, but like still.
Yeah, man, speak for yourself. I ran out of declining dollars junior year. It's been a tough couple of years. Well, I will be at the game too. I'll be in the press section. I'll be doing live updates for Riverfront U on my Twitter page and on Riverfront U's Twitter page. We'll also have a recap posted on Riverfront U's Twitter page Sunday morning after the game. I think it'll go live. So keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on all of our socials for more content to come. Ted, it has been a pleasure once again having you on. Red Brick Recap Week 6. We'll see big game on Saturday. That's all I'm going to say. Big game on Saturday.
Big game.
As we said before, it's always beat OU.
Beat OU, baby. Here we go.
Here we go. All right. Well, this has been Red Brick Recap episode 6. See you all next week. Same bad time, same bad channel.